Hello, the Pioneer viewers. I hope you're having a good day. Today, we will again share with you important developments regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. But first, we will talk about the critical event that has a major impact on the Vladimir Putin. And as it is known, there is a growing opposition from the Russian people against Putin's attempt to invade Ukraine, and those who support this opposition come not only from Russia but also from all over the world, and the latest example is the people of Georgia. The reactions in Georgia are deeply shaking the Russian administration. Ukraine's resistance has a historical background. Anti-Russian protests go back many years, and the Russian government decided to invade Ukraine in response. So the people of Georgia are taking the streets to avoid a similar fate. Allegedly, the Russian people are also supporting these protests, and even Russian citizens who fled the war and took refuge in Georgia are said to be participating in these protests. So what are the latest developments on this subject? Let's examine it together and share the details. But you know that as the Pioneer, we continue to inform you about the developments regarding the Russia-Ukraine war, so don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our daily reports and explanations. I also read all of your comments on our videos, so please continue to share your ideas about our content in the comments with us. And tell us in the comments what content you would like to see in the Pioneer channel. Let's start if you're ready, because the Pioneer is reporting. In this critical period of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, intense activities is observed on the front line. The Ukrainian armed forces are preventing the Russian advance by putting up a determined resistance. This resistance has not yet enabled the Russian army to reach the desired targets. And as I've stated in our previous reports, there are deep division within the Russian army. Increasing failures are exacerbating these divisions. So, however, at the current stage, the Russian armed forces are unable to make further progress. Moral and motivation levels have fallen to very low levels. Moreover, internal turmoil and conflicts have a negative impact on the moral and the motivation. Russia's potential to move forward is therefore quite limited. So in this process, the Russian people are also uncomfortable with this situation. However, they are unable to raise their voice due to the internal pressure and restrictions. Under Putin's pressure, most of the people cannot show their reactions openly, and this is because any act of opposition may lead to Putin's immediate reactions. And in this process, Putin is making the situation even more difficult by making moves to increase the pressure on the people. Therefore, the Russian people are going through a difficult period. So the reactions against Putin is not limited to the Russian people, but also in countries such as Ukraine and even Georgia. Georgia is in particular is one of the direct targets of Russia's expansionist policies, and Putin's desire to bring the Black Sea completely under Russian influence makes this country a natural source of concern. So the Russian leaders' tendency to send troops to the region leads the Georgian people to take precautions in advance. Despite Putin's attempts to send troops under various pretexts, Georgian people are determined to stand against these threats as before. In recent days, a draft law aiming to facilitate the activities of the Russian government's agents in the Georgia has come to the agenda. However, the Georgian people do not want this bill to be adopted because it could undermine the independence and security of their country, just like the invasion of Ukraine. The Georgian people realize that allowing Russian agents to move freely in the country could lead to the undesirable consequences as Ukraine suffered. Therefore, the Georgian people are concerned about the current situation and are determined to continue their efforts to protect their independence. In recent days, an anti-Russian movement has been reported to be on the rise in Georgia. The Georgian people once again took to the streets and launched a large-scale protest action. During the protest, slogans were chanted against the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, and many demonstrators also shouted the slogans in favor of Ukraine. The protests were called by 6 Georgian opposition parties, and demonstrators gathered in front of the parliament building to march to the prime minister's office. According to the Georgian Interior Ministry sources, in just 2 days, at least 13 people were detained and 1 police officer was injured in clashes. These events can be considered as a sign of growing popular movement in Georgia. The citizens who took the streets sent a strong message of unity against Russia and siding with Ukraine. These protests can be seen as reflections of growing political tension in the country, and further developments are likely in the coming days. And the opposition parties issued a statement following these protests, and the following statements were used in the statement. The Russian law initiated by the Georgian Dream is contrary to the Georgian constitutions. The will of the Georgian people to become a full member of European Union and NATO, and the long-term goal of securing Georgian sovereignty. Former Prime Minister Badizhda Ivanishalvis, who founded the Georgian Dream, is trying to kill Georgia's European future and keep the Russian one alive. So according to reports, the recent protests were watched with great interest in the Kremlin. The Kremlin seems to be closely following the reactions of the Georgian people, and the reason behind this is quite clear. Putin's leadership is trying to nip criticisms of him in the bud. But Georgia is probably the Russian leader's next target. However, the Georgian people have realized Putin's plans and have quickly mobilized. This was recorded as developments that entered Vladimir Putin, president of the Russian Federation. So, Russian people are also closely following these protests, especially in the opposition. Russian sources expressing sending greetings to the Georgian people are frequently included. It is seen that the protests of the Georgian people have also affected the Russian people. As I stated, the repression in Russia has a negative impact on the protest capacity of the Russian people. However, according to the allegations, especially Putin's opponents are preparing intensively. It is highly expected that opposition Russian citizens will organize protest actions in the coming days. Within the borders of the Russian Federation, the right of the Russian citizens to organize protests is highly restricted. However, many sources state that Russian citizens living in different countries organize protests in front of the Georgian consulates. So during these demonstrations, opposition migrant Russian citizens expressed their support for Putin, calling on him to Putin, take your hands off the will of the Georgian people. At these demonstrations in Europe, all the groups dispersed normally after the reactions against the Russian government, and this situation can be considered as a very important development in terms of the Russian citizens who have to leave abroad to see how democratic reactions are displayed. And in this context, the living conditions of the Russian citizens abroad may become more attractive for the Russian citizens living inside Russia. The situation stands out as an incentive for the Russian citizens to leave the territory of Russia. It shows that Russian citizens abroad are looking for an environment where they can exercise their democratic rights more freely. So what do you think? Do you think that the protests of the Georgian people can influence Putin's policies? How do the protests organized by the Russian citizens abroad affect the political atmosphere in Russia? And the last one, can the protests of Russian citizens living abroad initiate a movement for the change in Russia? Let me know in the comments, because you know that I read and I care a lot about all of your comments, of course.